See the words without my glasses on. This is terrible. We're ready to go in here.
Start over. He used to take us boat riding. We'd put a whole bunch of kids in the boat, and we would go down to the lake and swim, and then we would come back. And it was beginning to get dark, and lots of times under the bayou there would be logs or things that you couldn't see. And after it was my turn to ride the motor, rainy motor or whatever, and the propeller on the motor hit the log that was underneath the water that I didn't see. And down goes the water, goes the motor in the bayou, 25 feet down. So the next day, a few days later, I saw Father. I said, Father, did you ever get the motor? And he said, yeah. He got out straight away.
Yeah.
He lived here in Lacombe at that time. No, Wiley trailer. And he dove down in the bayou until he found the motor, and he brought it out. He thought Francis cleaned it all up or whatever he did to it, I don't know, but he put it on the boat. And he went on back down to the bayou.
What about Mary telling us the time of developing the pictures? What happened to you then?
Oh.
She was always in mischief, Mary. Always in mischief.
Yeah, he used to take a bunch of us kids up to develop pictures at the old church. We don't have a picture of it. It was right next to the road. And he took a bunch of us kids up there to watch him develop the pictures one night. So he had thrown a blanket across the stairs, and we go up the stairs. It was in the back of the church. And we go up the stairs, and then in order to keep the light out, he threw a blanket across it. Well, I was fooling around, and I just stepped off the
She fell down in the hole.
Came down and fell with it. And he just laughed. He thought that was the funniest thing he could. He would enjoy it if he thought he was getting into some kind of mischief.
Yeah.
He liked that.
I have to tell about the time we went with him Mary and I went with him to buy a bumper car in the old Model A. I don't know why there were just two of us, but that's all it was. And he made us stay. We couldn't go with him. He went to visit somebody off in the woods, and there was no road. You just dodged between the trees. So he left us there, and he left the key in. So we decided we were going to drive the Lizzie. And we couldn't know, we didn't know how to turn around. We just made it go backward and forward, backward and forward. First thing you know, it was steaming like everything, and it wouldn't go no more. And here he comes. Oh, we were out of gas. And he was furious.
Yeah.
But he wasn't mean to us. He was aggravated, I guess. I can't remember how he got the gas. I guess he went right back up in the woods again to somebody's house and got gas, and we went on back home.
And he brought us home.
Does anyone else?
Thick hands, you remember?
Oh, yeah, fat
And he
hands.
used this backhand boy. We never would hit the girl. We could do anything we wanted. It didn't matter to him. But the boys, they had to behave in catechism, and Father Francis was something else.
He was the one who taught us catechism. I can see us right now sitting on that front pew in the church, and him teaching us catechism. That was all the training we had in our religion.
And in those days, you had to kiss the bishop's ring and all that. And he would instruct us, and he would ask us all kind of questions and things that he thought the bishop was going to ask us, I guess. But he would prepare us very well. And he informed us what we had to do when the bishop came and all.
I remember, if I can interject something.
Yes.
Father Francis always, you know how people's appearances change by glasses, but I don't think I've seen anybody whose appearance was changed as much as his was, in the sense that when he did not have his glasses on, he was a lovable, kindly old man. You know, he was an old man to me. When he put his glasses on, though, and there were those European, old-time European glasses, especially when he said Mass or whatever, then he would look stern. I used to be afraid of him. You see, he never was in any way unkind to me, or ever. But I mean, he was kind of transformed by just putting those glasses on. And when he took them off, he was back to normal again. You see, I could sort of approach him then.
I remember him saying that he always wanted to dine in Lacombe.
That's right.
And he did dine in Lacombe.
Right.
Right in front of the building where he said his fresh hands. The old days of Lacombe was not there anymore. It's opposite the Exxon service station. They had a big building there. And Davis would use it as an office. And Father Francis said his first Mass now. And he was on his way in the ambulance, on his way into New Orleans. I think it was at St. Paul's, and when he station at St. Paul's.
Yeah.
And that was a great disappointment to him too, because they didn't, in those days, they didn't allow the priest to be familiar with those boys at St. Paul. And I don't know, I guess maybe the brothers were jealous, I don't know. That was my opinion. They didn't want to like the priest too much, more than they liked the brother. Maybe that wasn't the reason, I don't know what the reason. But he was very, very
If I could just,
fond about being in
if
the
I could say something about St. Paul, Father being at St. Paul. I think he was removed from Slidell in, was it 39? 39. The abbot at the abbey decided, the archbishop, it seems the archbishop asked the abbot, Father Francis did not keep the best books in the world, and who did in those days? But anyway, there was a new archbishop, Rummel, and you know, a new broom sweeps clean, so the abbot recalled him. But what he did to try to cushion the blow was that he gave Father Francis a trip to France. And Father Francis used to come to me, because by that time I was approaching my ordination. And he'd come tell me all his woes, you know. And I felt so sorry for him. And he told me that he was going to get this trip to France, and he was wondering why the abbot was all of a sudden so generous in giving him that trip. And he didn't tell him before he left, you see. But when he came back, he broke the news to him that he would be removed from Slidell and that he would be chaplain of St. Paul's. Well, the Christian brothers, although in those days they had the French Christian brothers there, and that should have been a good thing. But the Christian brothers were founded in the 16th century by St. John the Baptist de La Salle because many of the French priests were poorly educated and, you know, were not doing too good a job with catechism and stuff like that. So he founded the brothers with the idea of teaching catechism to take the place of the priest. And so in that sense, he was not anti-clerical, but I mean, it was, you know what I'm saying. And so they had a rule that the chaplain could not associate with the brothers, nor could he associate with the pupils, students. And he could hear confession, say Mass, but you ate alone. You ate by yourself. And I know because I went there many times. And that Father used to tell me, you know how Father Francis was. He was gregarious, everybody liked him, he made friends everywhere. And another thing, I don't think he had a car. And so he was really And I really think that he died prematurely because I think he was just...
Broken heart.
yeah, I think he was broken. The contrast from coming back from France and all that, and then coming back, and then, you know, a little too much. So I was looking forward to him living until I became a priest, but he didn't. He died shortly before. Anyway, so that's... Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that it was always his desire to die in Lacombe. And he granted his wish. Also, he used to tell us about the monastery all the time. Remember about how they had chickens and
Yeah,
they
fully.
used to raise their own vegetables.
Don't you remember on occasions he'd take us up there and we'd eat there? They had this fantastic bread which they bake in the game. Oh, that was great.
In today's paper, there's an article about it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, when he was getting ready to leave Lacombe, he came to the house. And how did he say that?
He made us get the Bible.
We did
That's
that.
another thing. He wouldn't tell you something. He would make you get the Bible and say, look in such and such a verse and such a chapter. And when we found it, it said, in a little while you will see me, and in another little while you will not see me. I don't remember what the verse was. But that's how he told us that he was going to be transferred from Lacombe.
And there was a lot of broken hearts about that too. I mean, and they had the biggest blowout when he celebrated his 25th anniversary on the hill at the chapel.
He did it at the chapel. He wasn't going to have any celebration. And they told him he had to. I don't know whether the bishop was an abbot or what. But that was one thing I never could understand. I said, but Father, you are under the abbot. He said, yes, we're under the abbot. He's our immediate supervisor or whatever. But he said, we're also under the bishop too. He has to answer. In those days, transportation was really a problem.
Yeah.
So, but I know that he celebrated his 25th anniversary, and he gave each one of us girls a cigar. We had to smoke that cigar, and we got so sick. We went under the tree by the chapel, and we laid down, and we were sick as dogs. And he just laughed to himself because we got sick smoking that cigar. Oh, he was so tickled.
That tree finally was blown down. It was right by the well up there, by the fountain.
Fell
was-
into and damaged all that stuff.
That's right.
A
Okay.
question you might be able to answer about the water flowing inside the chapel. Where is that an artesian well that's hooked up to?
From the spring.
And down
Where
the
does,
bottom.
where does the water go when it...
Well, it's got underground pipe and it goes down into the ravine in the front.
Yeah, but didn't Father Father Joseph changed that and drilled that new well?
But the water was flowing. That never did interfere with that water.
Oh, well, I thought that he connected that new well with the water that flows into the chapel. But he used to have a lot of springs around the corner. You never see a spring anymore. I guess the water level stopped. But that was a lot when we were kids, you remember?
You just spring spontaneously?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
it was coming
right.
up there.
You never did see a spring before, Judy?
Not without a pipe hooked up to it.
Yeah.
Well, if you go up the St. County Road, that old path that goes on the interstate, if you notice on the coming back side, there's always a wet spot, there's a spring underneath that. Have y'all noticed that?
No, I never did.
Coming back from St. County this way, you would be on the left-hand side there, you can see it, right along there, it's always wet, always water.
Yeah, you're right. You're
Have you
right.
ever noticed that?
Yeah, I noticed that.
And there's water there because it is a spring down under the ground.
And I'd say it can't be rain because it's only in one spot.
But you notice always the wet spot there.
Yeah.
You notice it the next time you go out.
Talking about rain, I just read this article about that Father Francis used to get caught in the rain. He'd also get caught in the woods. And near Christmas time, he was coming across the bayou down there by Balay and he fell in. So he swam across. And he got to And an hour later, he was in Lacombe, he was saying mass in his wet clothes with his vestment on top of it. Just went on like nothing, didn't make
Yeah.
any difference.
He's a real missionary.
Yeah.
He certainly was. And like I said, he loved children. He always had a bunch of us in the car. Remember one time he took us way up beyond the chapel. I don't know, there wasn't any bridge then by the chapel. It was just like a little trail almost. And you had to go across the Covison land
Yeah.
to get to the chapel.
So actually, he spent more time in Lacombe then than he did
Anyway.
Slidell.
Oh, yeah.
So that's
He
something.
loved Lacombe.
I never realized that.
Right. But I don't think you could find one person who knew Father Francis who didn't like it. I don't believe it was Protestants and all. Sure, when Mary and them was, not Mary, but Rebecca and them was speaking, he used to come visit them all the time and if they had some needs. Everywhere he went, they'd pick up needs.
That was the main argument. Everybody got to go.
Oh, it didn't make any difference. He had friends everywhere.
Yeah. It used to be a practice that every Sunday the priest would go to different houses. And I remember too, every now and then the nuns would come,
Yeah.
they'd be here for a week. They had to have a turn to see. Everybody had a turn.
That must have been in later years.
I remember, but Archie and I was married, and I know that I had to have them one night, and I had three one night. And they had whether they had a revival or what they were having, but they were here for some reason.
Maybe a wish.
I had one night that I had to skip dinner for those 3 months. And that was after Archie and I were married, when we lived in the house where we are now.
Well, you all know that little concrete thing you see down off the side there on the left-hand side going in, that was built as a swimming pool. That was Lacombe's first swimming pool. He built that for children to swim in. And they had a ram down there. It was a different kind of a pump. It would go shh, and the water would come out on the side like that. And we have the original ram. And we hope to make a monument of some kind out of it. Just haven't come up with an idea yet. We open for ideas.
Now that was a piston tank pump.
I don't know what it was,
It was a piston
but it would flow out on the side like that. Oh, that was
It would make
fascinating.
noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We called it a ram. I guess
Yeah.
that was what they called it in those days. Francis installed it.
I wish we had more people here that could give us their remembrance of Father Francis, that remembered him.
If I could just, things come back.
Yeah,
But,
just talk out loud, think out loud.
but you see, I had, my folks lived in Slidell, as I said. The old lady who was young then, she's 97, and I go see her every Sunday. Same old house and everything. It has a screen porch. And one night, and it was the night of the summer that I was going to enter the seminary, end of that summer. And I'd been somewhere with Father that day in his little Model T or Model A, and it was dark, and he brought me back to my folks' house, and everything was dark. And it's a rather nice house, and it's got one of these porches, swing-around porches, and I thought everybody was gone. And so he bade me goodbye, and I didn't realize it, how much I loved him. You know, kids don't think much. And I get to the porch, and he drives off, and in the darkness, I sit down, and I think I'm alone, and I bust out crying, and I, boo-hoo, oh. And all my folks were sitting on the porch around the side. And while I was crying, I was like, what's wrong? And the light went on, and there was my whole family. And they said, what happened? What happened? And it was a hard thing to say. What could you say at first? And then Are you sick or this, that? And finally, I said, I miss Father. And I thought about it years later. My father had died, you see, when I was a year and a half old. And probably he was a father figure to me, you know, for the one I didn't have. They would have been about roughly the same age. And so, anyway, and my folks never forgot that, you know. They were, remember that night? Remember that night when you thought you were alone? But he could inspire real love and devotion on the part of children, and in his rough and ready ways, you know. So that is something I'm glad I mentioned.
Well, you know, there's many people here in Lacombe thought of him as a father and a friend. Not just a priest, a father and a friend.
He always seemed like a father to us.
Yes.
Because our daddy was away on the locomotive. In those days they called it a locomotive engineer. And he was staying in Mississippi because that's the Sound Lumber Company. And he would ride the engine, I guess, inside of Mississippi. Remember we used to go up sometimes and stay there?
Yeah,
But Father
in
Francis,
Westonia, Mississippi.
yeah. But Father Francis was in and out of the house a lot.
All the time. Well, in fact, many of the priests from the Abbey used to come to the house. Every holiday, there were always 4 or 5 priests eating dinner with us. And they'd drop in all the time. And one time, the electricity went out, and my brother went up in the attic to see about it. Nothing would do. His Father Daniel wasn't. He had to follow him up there, and he falls through the dining room ceiling.
Typical of
She
Father
rocked and
Daniel.
all came down with water. But he jumped up and ran outside and went up the ladder and went back upstairs again and fell a second time. He was something with Father
We're
Daniel.
talking about
He
Father
was
Daniel.
God,
He played cards with us on Saturday night every now and then, and so we always went to Sam Garden's house, and Miss Sam Garden used to make a cake, and then she'd go to bed. I mean, she did not play cards. So we'd be playing cards, and one night Father Daniel got too much wine to drink. Then they were going to start drawing the straws to see, because Father Joseph, Joey's father had, I mean, he wasn't going to allow that, you know, you're not supposed to drink too much of that stuff. So everybody was trying to draw straws to see who was going to take him home, because they knew what was going to happen when they met home.
That's a good one.
Because he was staying down, you know, with Father.
Oh yeah.
they had to take him inside out.
No, he
No.
was running to the train, and they used to ride the train to come down and say mass.
Right.
That's how they would come down here to go home and say mass. I think all and Father Stevens.
Yeah.
I remember Father Stevens who used to come down.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That was when Father Francis was operating.
Because that was in 37, because Father Stevens was going to marry us, and then he ended up at West Indies.
Father Daniel's still accident prone.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
They ought to take the car away from him if you want to know the truth. When he tears out of our driveway, sometimes he'll come to the house before 8 o'clock in the morning. I said, Father, you hungry? No, I'm hungry, but I'll take coffee. Oh, that's the first thing we always ask the priest. You hungry? You want something to eat? No.
Well, Father Daniel had the habit of calling on people in the morning for breakfast, and he'd get there early sometime. And, well, this is really funny. It happened in New Orleans, in Metairie. And he knocked on somebody's door, and the person didn't know who it was. He lived alone, and she called the police. That was, because the police knew Father Dan, you know. And they came in and said, Father, they tell us somebody was trying to get in this lady's house. Do you know anything about it? And the lady said, it was Father Daniel. I didn't know it, you know. Anyway, it's one of those funny things, you know. Make a nice cartoon.
What about the restoration of the church? Had it fallen into disrepair?
Oh, yes, but that's another whole long session, Judy.
I understand though that you all did have, how did you all start to raise funds for
Finally, we begged for a year and a half. We wanted to restore the chapel. Nope, Archbishop don't want it. That's all we were told. So one day out of the clear blue sky, Father Strapper said, I got a letter. He says he wants the church restored, the chapel, or repaired, or whatever. And I know it's true because after he left, the other priest showed me the letter. I know that. So we thought, well, we're going to just have to see what we're going to do. We don't have a copper penny. What in the world are we going to do? And we came up with all kind of ideas. And my brother kept saying, have a $10,000 raffle. That was a refrain with him. He kept telling us that. So finally, we just kept hanging our feet about 6 months. In the meantime, Father Strauss wanted to put a fence around the chapel, and we had a fit. He said, what good is the fence going to do? He wanted to hurry up because he knew he was leaving. And then after he left, we made up our mind we'd have the raffle, and that's where we got the money. And we still have a tiny bit left. We're saving for when the roof goes bad. But that was very, very difficult to sell 250 tickets at $100 a piece, and that was in 1982. And if you think we didn't have a time.
Most of my sisters are
Yeah. That was
Golly. And Mary sometimes, she'd get discouraged. Maybe one day we didn't sell one. Next month she wouldn't want to go, and I'd get her up early. I'd say, come on, rise and shine. Today's the day, we got to go. And maybe we'd sell 3 tickets, and everything was fine again, until we couldn't sell anymore. But when Father Jerry came, and that's what we were doing, getting this all together and selling it, and we told him what we were going to do. And he said, $100, what did you say? I said, you heard. And he says, well, how are you going to do that? I said, oh, that won't be any problem, Father, but what we don't sell, you'll have to buy. He said, oh, no. But we saw them all.
she came up with the idea of having a party.
We had a good party. Father Beauchamp came to that party. He says, I go to about 3 of these a year, but he said, I've never been to one as much fun as this one. But that was a great day when I tell you, there were many times I doubted we were going to do it.
Did you set a deadline to sell them by?
We didn't put a date on it because we didn't know when we'd get them sold.
Right, that's what I was wondering.
Well, the $100 was took away almost.
They did. We could have sold 5 more right in the area. And we got tickets from, 3 different states?
Yeah.
3 or 5 different states. I don't remember which. And one Sunday night, I got a telephone call from Baton Rouge, and this lady said, I understand y'all selling raffle tickets. I said, oh yeah, we want to restore the chapel. Oh, I'm so happy. I said, well, how did you find out about it? She said, well, it's been in the newspaper down there, and someone sent us a clipping. And she said, I'd like to buy a ticket. I'd like to buy some tickets. I said, well, that's fine. I said, how many do you want? She said, 5. I said, do you realize they're $100 a piece? Yeah, I know that. I want 5. She said, I was married in that church, and I want to write her a letter and invite her to come down.
Isn't that nice?
From Baton
Isn't that
Rouge.
nice?
That was, well, it just can't hardly describe the excitement of that time. We had a great time. And then, of course, Father Jerry, he left before we had the drawing, but he came back for the drawing, and Father Brian was here, and he wouldn't buy a ticket, but he just came to the party anyway. I said, you know, you're not supposed to be here. You didn't pay $100. He said, that don't make any difference. Well,
The old church St. Cecilia's when it was destroyed. I understand I knew that the Sacred Heart statue survived. I wonder, is that statue still out in church?
that's another story. Mary, tell them about that.
It disintegrated. Father Stiff, when he was our pastor, he put it out in the yard. And I went down there and I saw it on his pedestal out here, and I said, Father, that statue's going to be ruined. And he said, no, I haven't figured. He said, it never will disintegrate. About a year later, I go down and it was all in shambles. So, Father Smith.
Smith.
Oh,
Father
Smith, okay.
Smith.
Yeah.
He was in it for a while. Yeah, he was our pastor for a while.
Yeah, he was ordained.
Yeah, he was ordained. But he said that he could only, you know,
I guess mine.
when he go to the
Museum in Bayou Lacombe, Louisiana. The topic for today is Our Lady of Lourdes Shrine in Lacombe, Louisiana.
Are you gonna put down who's recording, or are you,
Wait,
or do you just,
we're recording now. How about introduce yourselves?
my name is Alex Buckley. I'm from Lacombe, and today we're gonna gather memories of Father Francis and people who remember him.
I'm Father Hugh Baumann from St. Joseph's Abbey. I knew Father Francis when I was a boy.
I'm Mary Correct, Lacombe, and I attended school here when I was a child.
Okay.
As Judy told you, anyone who'd like to share their memories with us, if they remember anything about Father Francis, if you will stand and state your name and speak loud so we can catch it on the tape. Father Francis was born December the 19th in 1875 in France. His mother's maiden name was Josephine Astor, and he was christened Raymond. He was one of 11 children, and 3 of his sisters became nuns. When he was 12 years old, he entered the St. Barb Seminary, and 6 years later, oh, I'm sorry, I got that mixed up. Yeah, 6 years later, after that, he was entered Notre Dame. His mother died 3 years before he was ordained a priest on October the 4th, 1904, at Villers, France. In 1913, Father Francis left his native France for America. He arrived 5 weeks later in New Orleans. He was at the Annunciation Church only 2 days before he was sent to St. Joseph's Seminary, the Benedictine monastery at Benedict, Louisiana. He probably was homesick for the deep valleys and rocky hills of Achaday, France. However, he adapted quickly to the beauty of St. Tammany Parish, and he was eager to know about the people of the area and their backgrounds. And he was a great history buff. So through the archives at the Abbey, he gathered a lot of facts about St. Tammany Parish. Next year, he was given the duty of finishing in Lacombe, a church which had been started in 1890, and that church was named St. Cecilia. Well, a few days after he was given this charge, the hurricane of September 1915 lashed through Lacombe, leaving the church in ruins. The only thing left of the church was a statue of the Sacred Heart, and it was unscathed, and they found it under all of the debris. Not with despair, but determination to build a new church quickly, he called a meeting, but no one came. But that didn't discourage Father Francis. He then formed a committee and started fundraising. He asked for and got a donation of $350 from the Extension Society. He wrote to an architect friend by the name of Father Canon Lawrence in Medellin, France, and he received funds for the new church. Now this was in 1915. At Easter of 1917, the first Mass was celebrated in the church. And naturally, it was named Sacred Heart because of the statue being found, the only one that was saved. And there's a little, well, we'll tell about that later. It was a beautiful church, we thought. It had arches and pillars and the star sparkled on the ceiling. He painted it blue, and oh, it was a great, glorious day that day. But he was still not content, so he decided to build a school. And 3 years to the day after the hurricane in 1918, Archbishop Shaw came to Lacombe to dedicate the church and confirm 82 children, but some of those came from Bayou Lacombe and were confirmed in Lacombe. In 1920, he established a mission at Hygeia, an anti-TB camp between Lacombe and Slidell. Using his bicycle and later his motorcycle, he celebrated the Holy Mass once a month over a period of 10 years. He visited and comforted the sick, especially the children. In 1930, the camp was closed and patients were moved to New Orleans. Now, in that same year, in 1920, he also erected a church and a school in Bayou Vincent. In 1923, all of this should have made him happy. Not so, vaguely discontented. He often roamed the beautiful countryside. He particularly loved Bayou Lacombe because it reminded him of the cove in Lourdes. One spot in particular delighted him, a quaint glen, a profusion of wild ferns and violets, a bubbling spring of clear water that flowed down into the ravine in front of the little chapel that he built, and it trickled into Bayou Lacombe. Of course, you all probably know where the little chapel is. It's just about a mile up the road here on the Fish Hatchery Road. This was built in the center of the glen on a grassy knoll shaded by old trees rather. This restful place probably gave him more comfort than any grand man-made cathedral. He didn't need any grand plans for this, his own beautiful little humble church, nor did he need highly skilled craftsmen. It was built by the peoples of Lacombe and even the boys who rode in his tin Lizzie, which he had acquired by that time. And he named the little church Our Lady of Lourdes Shrine after the one in France. As I said before, he was a great history buff and was interested in the missionary court orator, Father Rouquette, who died when Father Francis was only 2. He erected a large white cross at the site of Rouquette's first rustic chapel, and also there was a little Sacred Heart cemetery there. In 1929, he was transferred from Lacombe and made the pastor of Slidell. Father Francis was a familiar figure over all the parish, at the Abbey, at St. Paul, and of course where he was parson. But most of his time was spent in Lacombe, 1915 to 1929. He had a heart attack May 9, 1940, and was being rushed to the hospital. It was there that he died in front of the Daviswood Lumber Company, where he had said his first Mass in Lacombe. Father Francis Balay lives in grave number 44 at the Abbey Cemetery. There's no great monument to glorify this great man, nor does he really need one. He made his own monument in 4 churches, 3 schools, 3 recreation halls. His epitaph is a smile on people's faces when they say Father Francis. Now I guess, Father, would you tell us your memories of Father Francis?
Yeah, well, I met Father, I was just a boy, 11 years old. And I lived in New Orleans, and we had some folks living in Slidell. And so in the summertime, they'd ship me over to Slidell, get me out of the way. And, well, I don't know how many are Catholic here, but I met him, you see, in the church in Slidell. I was an altar boy in New Orleans, and so I went to him and asked him if I could, serve Mass in Slidell, and, he said, fine. So I started to serve Mass, and, well, in those days, the prayers of the Mass were in Latin, and I had been well trained in New Orleans by this strict German priest. He made me learn them or else, he'd kill you if you didn't. And so when I came here to Slidell, well, the altar boys used to mumble the prayers. They really didn't know the Latin in Slidell, so Father Francis noticed that I knew it, so that struck his attention. So one day he asked me if I would go along with him on his missions around the country. And since there was no hospital and no clinics like now, they had doctors, but nothing in the line of a hospital as far as I remember. Well, he'd go to people's houses and minister to them there. If somebody was dying, he gave the last rites there, and for me as a city boy, that was just opened up a new life. I mean, coming out here to the country for one thing, and not only did he work in Slidell at the time, but you see, he brought me up to Lacombe, and he worked at Trail River. He worked at what do you call it? Baumann in Slidell, and so he was kind of a roving missionary. That's really what it was. And anyway, so one day he took me up to Lacombe here, and we stopped in the front of the church. Big, beautiful oak trees there, and there was an artesian well. And coming from New Orleans, where everything, you turn off the water, just to see water flowing that way was, for me, was a big thing. Anyway, and it was noontime, so he said, well, we have to eat. So we went down to the store, and I was trying to figure out where it was, but it was right down 190 from the center of town. It was kind of about a half a block off the highway. And we got a loaf of French bread, naturally, French, and a big wedge of American cheese, and we went back to the church, and then he said, well, we got to get something to drink. And I said, well, yeah. So he took me up to the church, which was right there, and we climbed up the bell tower, and we got up to where you ring the bells. Well, to my surprise, he took some kind of a crowbar and lifted up a couple of the planks on the floor, and the whole floor was lined with altar wine, the wine used for Mass. And and I was shocked, I'd never seen it stored that way. And he took a bottle and then hammered back. And, we went to the front of the church and had our meal. That was the first wine I had ever drunk. For one thing, of course, it was still prohibition, in 1929. And you're not supposed to use table wine for meals. You see, it was kind of doing two wrong things, but I didn't know anything about that. So we had our wine and cheese and bread, and right there, it was very beautiful, very setting. And Once we stopped at this hygia, but he wouldn't let me go in, you know, tuberculosis and all that. So anyway, and then one day he took me down to the little shrine down here. And he told me about something about that in France he had had a very special devotion to the Blessed Mother, Our Lady of Lourdes. Apparently he had gone to Lourdes, I suppose, a couple of times anyway. And the order, you see, he entered an order over in France. It was he was a Trappist over there. And the monastery, of all things, what it produced was it made milk chocolate, you know, chocolate bars, which was a strange thing, you know, for a monastery to do. But the thing was, the monks never ate any. They were not allowed to eat that. You see, they made it but couldn't eat it, you see. And because they never ate meat and milk products or anything. So anyway, he decided to come to the United States and join our monastery, and as was pointed out. So anyway, so I rode around with him in his little Model A along the gravel roads in those days. And I remember here in Lacombe one day, we stopped at, and I think I asked you about this, but at people whose name was Culbertson. Does anybody know of any Culbertsons here?
Next to the chapel.
Next
The
to-
door is still, the little house is
Next to the chapel,
That's
okay.
the way you used to have to get to the chapel.
Yeah.
That part.
Well, you know, he would stop in and people would give him meals. Anytime he stopped in, I couldn't get over that, you see. And they were so glad to see him, you know. And of course, a boy, you know, I was hungry all the time. And I'd never tasted food like that. It was really good because I was used to Irish cooking at home. And Irish cooking is very bland, as you know. Irish potatoes, spinach, and something like that. You know, but no seasoning. You get over here, and it was altogether different. So he said, he used to, every now and then he'd say, well, it's not so bad being a missionary, you know. We kind of smiled and laughed. But looking back on it now, I can see that he already had in his mind that he was going to ask me if I wanted to be a priest. You know, and he was kind of showing me all the little things. So anyway, so I knew him then here, and some beautiful experiences here in Lacombe, and in Slidell also. In Slidell, he built a little swimming pool, which you could walk from the back porch of the rectory right into the pool. And it was about, I'd say about 15 by 12. It was real small, but he wanted something because the heat was awful for him. You know, France doesn't get this hot. Another thing, he used to take me swimming in the lake. We would go out and put our bathing suits on in the weeds, on the shore, some godforsaken place, and go in, you know, all kind of stumps, bottles and everything, you know. It was, but we had the time of our lives, you know. It was just really, there was a man, father was, what, in his 50s, and I was 11, you know. We had a really good time. And then one day he said that he was going up to what he called his home, and he said it's St. Joseph's Avenue. Would you like to come? And of course that was, he had really prepared that, you see. It was kind of a trap.
Yeah, he was a schemer.
A schema. And I had already finished elementary school, you see. I was ready for high school. So we went up there, and well, I fell in love with the place right away. It was a beautiful place. It had kind of a wild beauty to it then. You know, it's not like it is now. But it was beautiful. And So after I was there a while, and took me swimming, and showed everything, showed me the baseball diamond, all the things you'd show a boy, you know. And then treated me to a nice big meal, and for some reason, I don't know why, but I always associated plenty of milk with God's blessing or something, I don't know. And at the Abbey, for dinner, we had a pitcher of milk just for the two of us, about this high, you know, and I thought, well, God has really blessed this place. You see. This is a place to come. And so finally he popped the question, have you ever thought about being a priest? And, well, to make a long story short, I ended up that September in the seminary, and that's 60 years ago, this coming Saturday.
Oh.
1930. I was 12 years old then, and Father, I was figuring out the other day, Father died when he was 65, I think, and he had been a priest, you know, 36 years. Here I am. I'm going to be 50 years next year, a priest, and I'm in my 70s, and, you know, I never would have thought, you know, that I would ever get to be old, you know, like, you know how it is, and all that. But anyway, but those were real beautiful memories. And I came today, really, out of gratitude to Father. I feel that I owed it to him, you know, and as much as I can, you know, boost him up and say things about him, because he was a good man. As a boy, I never really thought it out at the time, you know, verbalize it and whatnot, but I suppose the reasons why I admired him was because I felt he was a man of God, and he was genuine. He rang genuine to me. There was no, you know, he didn't say, you know, the priest has an easy life, you know, he told it like it was. And all I had to do was look at his life and see. He led a hard life. And at the rectory in Slidell, there wasn't much to eat. You know, in the rectory, he had no cook, nothing. I don't know how he made out. But
We went to everybody's house to eat.
well, that's true. That's true. But he kind of lived trusting in God, and you know that God would take care of everything, and that, you know, and do your work and let God do the rest. You see, and it worked out pretty well. So I suppose that's why I decided that I'd like to be the type of priest that is like he was, Benedictine, and well, in some way to be like him. And so as it turned out, for the last almost 20 years now, I've been going to Slidell on Sundays. And so that's kind of a nice thing, because it brings back all those memories. So I pass that to you, give that to you now, just to, it isn't all that much, but to me it was significant. It changed my life. And it was because he was a good priest, he was genuine, and because he showed interest in youth, and because he wasn't scared to ask me if I wanted to be a priest. And that's what I do. When I meet boys now, I don't hesitate to ask, have you ever thought about being a priest? And you'd be surprised. Or get boys up there, just for a short visit. And so anyway, so I'm sure that Father's kind of smiling right now.
Oh, yeah.
He used to call me, he never called me by my name. I suppose in French it would have been Henry. But he called me either garçon, or he'd say, hey, l'artiste, artist. I don't know why. Or hey, là-bas. Hey, là-bas, you know. Yeah. And And then he said other things in French, but I didn't understand. I never did. Anyway, so thank you anyway for listening to me. Really, thank you.
And he was very fond of children. I'm married correct. And I lived in Lacombe, Newport, Francis. And he always had a bunch of children in his car. Whenever he went anywhere, he'd have a bunch of children. And I remember one time, up at the monastery, there used to be a lot, up at the chapel, there was a lot of water all the time. It would rise above the hill. And I was in my first communion clothes. I think it was when, in those days, we made a little communion and a solemn communion, that he used to call it, that Francis did. And I don't remember, it must have been my solemn communion. He took me up to the chapel, and I remember taking off my shoes and socks. I was in my communion dress. I guess Mom was spanking when I got home. But anyway, I walked around all the water around me. He loved children. He let them just have fun. He used to take us swimming down at the lake, like you mentioned, and he'd put a whole gang of kids in the car and take us down there to the lake to swim. And he would do all kinds of things. He never did fuss out too much.
No.
Mary, tell them about the big deal he made out of when children had their first communion.
Oh, yeah, he had the little angels. In fact, Margie was one of the angels one year. We'd have the angels would come to the pew and escort each child up to the altar. And they would receive communion, and then they would escort you back to the pew. He would have a great ceremony. It would be very impressive. You couldn't forget it. Very good. It's still in my mind. But in those days, you couldn't get to the chapel like you do now. You had to go across that covered land with you, and you crossed the little ravine with it was sheer there.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, he's going to tell us? That would be interesting. So,
Tell them about the time you went to Chinchuga.
oh, when he took, I don't know why he took me to Chinchuga, but he told me if I would make out I was deep and dumb, that they would give me a bag of candy. So sure enough, I wouldn't say a word, nothing, absolutely nothing. But he would tell you all kinds of stuff to do. And I remember when, what's his name, that Catholic that was running for office in New York, Smith, I believe.
Yes, Al Smith.
Al Smith. And he put the radio on to get the return.
Okay.
Big time that night, listening to it.
Or did you get your candy?
Oh yeah, they gave me a big bag of beans. That's what I said.
That was a treat because back then we didn't have any candy, just kind of candy you knew how to make yourself. But to get store-bought candy, man, that was a luxury.
Yeah, a great big bag of candy they gave.
Do you remember anything more about communion, Margie?
I'm going to Moran, and I'm a native of this home. I remember before Francis, because he used to take us on that little board out. Everybody was standing on the fenders or wherever you could get, as many kids as you could get, and we'd go swimming up at the chapel up there. They had this little, you could see down in that ravine, there's a little concrete. It's not very large, but anyway, that's where we could go swimming. And then you made your communion. It's not like it used to be your first communion, and like Mary said, it wasn't called confirmation and all this stuff. That was you had your little communion, your big communion, and then we had the little angels. Billy Buckley and his correct sister and myself, and then Baumann, and a Ruth Simon. I have that picture with for you. I should have brought it up here today, looked it up. And we were little angels, and we have to escort the other children that were making communion up and down. You know, he made a great big procedure out of that. And that's what I remember about him. Like calling the kids, every kid and their brother, and then how he used to elaborate on the communion.
Excuse me a second. Young children, as you know, are very uneasy. We sure hate to interrupt this beautiful meeting for the historic. I think we need to. Well, you tell them about it because.
Please tell us, one of you.
Well, I need to take both these little ladies out here and have a talk with them before we can come back inside.
Well, it looks like you stuck. You're gonna have to tell it.
You know, you got it from the edge on.
Oh, we gotta hear that now.
Please, with the sound, everything.
Okay. All right.
Just come back and say it.
Mary, what about when we went boat riding that time? Tell them what happened to you.
Oh, yeah, he was letting his
Wait,
tail have a
stop,
turn.
stop. This came up, Judy. Good.